Good afternoon, everybody. Welcome along. 33 years in 31 days, day 2. Those of you that are already in here and drop some comments in, thank you. Just somebody let me know that you can hear me, so before I make a complete fool of myself and talk to nobody. But good afternoon to you all. Welcome along. There's 15 of you in here in the minute, so that's great. All okay. Thank you, Laura and Kerry. Kerry, good to have you in here. Good to have you in here. So, 33 years in 31 days, and today is day 2. So if you saw yesterday's broadcast or if you missed it, shame on you. We covered my years before I was a full-time officer. We covered 1988 to 1991, which are my years as a special constable, where I got a feel for policing and whether or not I wanted to do it. As we said yesterday, the jobs were scarce. They were hard to come by. If you had a job, it was a good idea to keep hold of the thing. And so being a special, although I wanted to apply for the regulars straight away, I wasn't old enough at 20. So I had to wait. And actually being a special was quite a good thing because it gave me an opportunity to get a little insight into how the police were and how they operate and what we do, without committing myself fully and just giving my job up and then walking out 6 months later and going, I hate policing, I don't want to do this. So it was a good plan and a good theory just to test it all out. As it stands, and as you'll know, I loved it. I really wanted to be part of it. Slight setback, which has been a common thing throughout my career, actually, when I've applied for things. There's always been a setback initially. But a slight setback in that my first application was rejected. As we said yesterday, I threw the towel in, told them they could, I didn't tell them they could forget it, but I was basically saying, forget it, I'm not going to be a police officer. But it was my elder brother who turned me around. So the application went in, the application took some time, but eventually, just before Christmas 1990, I got the letter from the Cheshire Police, the Greater Manchester Police Headquarters, which was Chester House at Boyer Street in Old Trafford, no longer there. But that was the headquarters. I got the letter saying, you've been successful. Your start date is the 18th of February, 1991. What an amazing time. So let's look at 1991. It's very busy, packed year, 1991, but mostly it's packed with training and getting you up to speed with all those things that you need to know. Yeah, Kerry, I was rejected. Straight after the home interview, I later learned that the inspector didn't particularly like me for whatever reason, but there we go. Who knows? Anyway, during the war. So it feels like it was that long ago sometimes. So 18th of February, 1991, my first thing that I have to do is turn up at Greater Manchester Police's training centre, which is this fabulous site, actually. It's a fabulous site and some wonderful buildings on the side of an old convent and stuff in the north of Manchester called Sedgley Park. And Sedgley Park wasn't new to me. I'd been there several times before. I was sworn in there as a special constable. So it wasn't a new environment for me. It wasn't intimidating or unnerving or anything. I knew the environment. Although now I was residential, I was going to stay there. But arriving there on the first day and driving through those gates was quite a moment because you suddenly think, this is it. I've committed. I'm in a new career, and this is how it's going to be. So we got ourselves settled in, we got ourselves straight, and one of the first things that when you get there is they introduce you to something, and what they introduced us to was this. I'm going to actually make that solo just for a minute. They introduced us to this, and that is your PDP, your Probationer Development Profile. You can just see with my lovely handwriting with that sticker on the top to say that it was mine. But there you go, your Probationer Development Profile. And this book, this folder, stuck with you for 2 years. You had to write about yourself, self-assess yourself, prove exactly, blow stuff. It's been in the lot for years, Kerry. blew the dust off it and everything. But this thing had to be, there was no getting away from it. It was full of you assessing yourself, people assessing your self-assessments, good afternoon, and telling you what they thought about you and whether they thought you were coming up to speed. In some regards, quite a useful tool. In other regards, it could be destructive. My experience with it wasn't so bad, and it was more like a necessary poison that you had to go through. But that was the thing that you were first introduced to, and that is the thing that you had to start filling in straight away. So give a little background for that first period of training. And I may get some of the timing slightly wrong, but the training starts at Sedgley Park, and I believe it was 2 weeks. 2 weeks at Sedgley Park. So you did 2 weeks at Sedgley Park. Then you went out to division, and you went to the division you were going to be posted to, and you spent 2 weeks on division, looking at the division and all the things that went on. Then you went to Bruges. Now, this is a completely different kettle of fish to what people joining now are used to, but the Home Office used to run national police training centres, and there were a number dotted around the country, and forces from all the regions would all come together at that training centre. So you did 5 weeks at Bruges. Then you came back and did 5 weeks on division, being tutored by a tutor constable. Sorry, no, you did 10 weeks at Bruges. 10 weeks at Bruges. 5 weeks being tutored by your first tutor constable, then back to Bruges for another 5 weeks. You would pass out. You would then go and being tutored for another 5 weeks, at which point they would sign you off or extend you if you weren't up to standard and so on. So that was the sort of basic layout, and it was made quite clear to you in the early sort of days of getting it going that you would not be allowed any time off or annual leave at all during that training period, obviously. So the final week of your actual foundation course was 1 week's leave. So there we go, Sedgley Park. And as I said earlier, nothing new for me there. It was an environment I was used to, and so it wasn't intimidating or threatening to me whatsoever. I was quite comfortable being at Sedgley Park. But one of the things that really struck me at Sedgley Park was it took us about 3 days before we got our uniform issued to us. We'd previously been measured up and all done, but it was about 3 days before our uniform actually arrived. And I can remember being in the accommodation block. I dragged this big box with all my uniform back to my room, and everybody on the block was in the class was on the same corridor. We were all there, ironing shirts and pressing trousers and tunics and trying to get them smart, pulling a lot of help from the guys who were ex-military who knew how to deal with uniform, getting everything straight and sorted. But one of the defining moments for me was something that I'm very proud of, and something that a lot of officers hold in a great deal of regard and affection, and that's the custodian police helmet. As special constables, we were not issued the helmet. We had flat caps, and that was that. I'm being attacked by the dog now. To get that helmet was quite a moment. And I can remember standing, putting it on and looking at myself in the mirror and barely recognizing myself. But it was a sort of, it's not French, but excuse my language. This shit suddenly got real. It was something like, crikey, you're in now. This is how it's going to be from this point onwards. But great times at Sedgley Park in that 2 weeks. You build up a lot of friendships with the people that you, I've got a photograph somewhere, I can't find it, just bear with me a second. You build up a lot of friendships with the people that you work with, and those friendships last then really throughout your career. There's a heck of a lot that goes on, but those friendships remain. I am getting mithered to death by the dog. Go away. Why is that picture not opening? So bear with me just 1 second while I just find this picture. Ah, there it is. There it is. Right. So if I come back here now and I can share that picture there. Now, there you go. Sedgley Park. 2 classes we're running at Sedgley Park. I'll put that solo just for a minute so you can see. But there we are. That is my first class, and the sergeants were the class trainers, the chief inspector and commander of the training school, and then all the team in the class. And you make some amazing friendships with those people. And although you all go separate ways into different divisions and doing different things and doing different career paths and everything, there's still a connection with those people that sits there all the time throughout your career. And even now, those people will still get in touch. Just recently, I've had messages from one of the people on there who I think last time I spoke to him, he was an inspector with GMP, but he could well be further along now, I'm not sure. And also one of the guys that I joined with that came to the same division as me, came to the D division. So that's the class at Sedgley Park. That's what we do. You do all you know, basic introductions to stuff, and I can remember an inspector from one of the training courses coming in, and he sat down and he pointed straight at one of the officers and yelled at him and said, "You, what's the definition of theft?" Like this, and this lad sat there like, and then he turned away and said, "You don't know," and he pointed to one of the girls and said, "You, what's the definition of theft?" I was sitting on my hands because I knew what the definition of theft was because of my special experience, but fortunately didn't point at me. But he made this big thing about being aggressive and angry about getting the definitions. And then he stopped and he said, "Whatever your worries and concerns are, training school here and at Bruges is not like that." And sort of he used a bit of reverse psychology to sort of put people at their ease, really, that it is and it was a very easy learning environment. They didn't make it tortuous. It wasn't exam after exam after exam and stuff. It was a very relaxed training regime. So anyway, you spend your first couple of weeks at Sedgley Park, and then we went out onto division. I said before, there was an officer that was on the D division as well. There was 2 of us posted to the D division, which is in the south side of Manchester. And I was posted to Wythenshawe. The police station at Wythenshawe was Brownlee Road. That's where I was posted to. And the other chap was posted to the north of the division. So he would be covering the Cholton and the Withington police stations. As I said earlier, we had to tour all the different departments within the division. So we went out with the scenes of crimes officers, and we went to spend some time with CID, and we went to the community contact people, domestic violence people. We had them then, very different to what they are now, but they were there. Visited the traffic department, went to fingerprints, and did all sorts of different things. But one of the things we did is we had to go to Platt Lane. Platt Lane, oddly, the D divisional headquarters, but it wasn't on the D division, it was in the C division. Peculiar, but just the way the boundaries and things had changed. But we went to Platt Lane because we had a meeting with the chief superintendent of the division. We sat down in this room, which later turned out, later in my career, was the parade room for the traffic unit, but at this time it was the chief super's office. And he sat us down, he was talking to us and introducing us and welcoming us to the division and the rest of it, and asking where we lived. And when he realised where we lived and where we were being posted, he said, "Well, that's ridiculous." He said, "You're travelling miles to get to where you work, and so are you. Whereas if we swap around, but it's on your doorsteps, it's much better. You know, have you got any objections?" We didn't have any objections, but I think even if we had, we wouldn't have said anything. So myself and the officer, I won't say his full name, but Officer Gary, myself and Gary swapped. And he actually mentioned this to me on Facebook yesterday. He said, "I hope you're going to mention that swap in the first week." And we were swapped. So Gary ended up at Brownlee Road in Wythenshawe, and I ended up at Cholton and Withington, and initially at Withington, which was a porter cabin down a side street off the main road, which was just a cabin. That's all it was. Well, there we go. So you spend your time doing that, and this is where my first arrest comes in. Now, it's a bit of a misnomer that, because I'd arrested people already, but my first full-time PC arrest. So I was quite relaxed with all that kind of stuff already, and quite comfortable going out on patrol in a Panda and doing stuff. But we'd gone out. I'd gone out with one of the beat officers, community beat officers. We used to call them area constables in Manchester. And I was in Wythenshawe on this occasion, although it was based on the north. We were in Wythenshawe and we were working. We got a report of somebody with a stolen motorcycle. And we were round the area of Wythenshawe near the hospital, and suddenly this motorbike popped out. And he chased it for a very short while, and then this lad sort of went up a grass verge, and we came to a stop and couldn't go any further, and he got off and ran, and I just went charging after him. I had no idea where I was. That's one of the biggest sort of concerns when you get a rush of adrenaline and almost you're so focused on getting hold of the suspect that you want to catch, that you can find that you end up when you go and they say, I've got him, and you, where are you? And you think, I haven't a clue. And modern days now, it's not without its faults and foibles, but officers' radios are tracked on the mapping software within control rooms, so they can actually see pretty much where the cops are. Sometimes it's a bit laggy, but it gives a good idea. At this point, none of that. If you didn't know where you were, nobody would find you. And so we chased through, cut a long story short, chased through, grabbed hold of this lad, got him locked up. And that sort of stood me in good stead with the training department and everything, because I got stuck in straight away and got a prisoner. So that was great. The next thing that happens within that point then is you then go to Bruges. And Bruges, as I said, was the National Police Training Centre. I was assigned to D class at Bruges. That's our intake there. The difference with this intake now is that the previous photograph I showed you was all GMP officers, but when you come to Bruges, it's a national or a regional training centre, which means that Merseyside are there, Cumbria are there, GMP are there, Lancashire are there. So it's a regional centre. So you can see, if I put that solar, you can see that there are a number of different types of uniforms. So if you look, I'm top left on the very back row with a helmet that looks like the size of a bucket, but that's the GMP uniform with the badge and the number on the crest on the chest. But the guy to my left, the first one next to me, that's the Lancashire uniform, then GMP, then two Merseyside officers. So you can see that there's slight differences in the uniform stuff, but it brings everybody together. The interesting thing here as well is that there's two sergeants at the front. The one on the left was a GMP sergeant that was at the training school. The chap on the left was from Dorset. And the only reason that he was from Dorset was because the training establishment down in the southwest, similar to Bruges, I think it was called Chantmal, was closed for some reason, some refurb work or something going on. So they'd all shifted to different areas, and he was up at Bruges, because on that course we also had officers from the states of Jersey. So it was quite interesting sort of mix of cops from all around the region. But that was a class. You spend 10 weeks there doing the training and learning the law and doing role plays and exercises and building up all your knowledge and skills. And it has to be said, I've spent 3 years in the specials, but you are only scratching the surface of what you really need to know. There was so much more to know. So it was a big learning curve, lots of stuff going on. We also did an awful lot. You do a lot of drill, something I don't think they do at all now anymore. And when I see them doing it at headquarters occasionally, you still go. We were drilled by a guardsman. And so we were all drilled to the standards of the military guards, and their style of marching and standing to attention. If in the Metropolitan Police, they tend to come to attention like the Navy, they just sort of sidestep in, whereas we were knees up, stamp your foot down, as the guards in the red jackets and busbies and stuff. But that was that. So we end up at Bruges. You spend 10 weeks doing Bruges, and then I went back out to division and did 5 weeks. I did 5 weeks in tutor with a gentleman called Chris Gibson. I'll not say a great deal about that. It was just, I was just being tutored and shown the job and starting to learn the ropes. One thing of note, which we'll come back to in future episodes, is at one point we were walking down the road in Charlton and the van pulled up and there were 2 guys on the van. And Chris was chatting with him and he introduced me and he said, these 2 guys here, lovely fellas, they're not on the block that you're going on, but they'll always help you out if you're stuck with anything. That's Zuni and that's Oki. Remember those names, Zuni and Oki. Other than that, 5 weeks later, we went back to Bruges. You go back to Bruges and you do another 5 weeks, and that's your final 5 weeks, and you're working towards your passing out parade. And one of the things that sort of happens at that point is the classes all get swapped around. So I was no longer D class, I was Q class, and the whole class makeup was completely different. And one of the things that comes about as part of the final 5 weeks is that we have a dining in night. Now, to be fair, the food at Bruges was absolutely abysmal. It was horrible food. Everybody supplemented it with stuff that they bought from shops on site or went out to get and all sorts of stuff. It was just awful. Although going off site was a very difficult thing to get approval for, because generally you drove in on a Sunday night or a Monday morning and you didn't leave until 3 o'clock on a Friday afternoon when it was like a Grand Prix start, everybody trying to get out of the place. But the food was shocking, but you had dining in night. And dining in night also led to some presentations, and the most coveted award for the presentations was at Bruges was called Jack's Plaque, and Jack's Plaque was the award for drill, the best class at drill. And so that's my Q class there. Again, I'll pop that up full screen. We all took photographs holding the plaque with the whole class around us, so everybody was holding the plaque, but that's me with the plaque and Q class. There's a gentleman on the far right hand side there that I'm going to refer to in a second, and the chap immediately, the face immediately to my left, or to the left as you look at the photograph, is Gary, who was the officer that was on the D division with me as well. He was in my class at Bruges the second time around. But there we go. That's the class doing all this stuff. We passed out. We won the Jack's Plaque, which was this most amazing thing, and what have you. But just that chap on the far right-hand side, just going to sort of draw your attention to that chap on the far right-hand side, because here's another photograph on our passing out parade, where all your family join you and come to see you at the passing out parade. We are wearing a red lanyard, and the red lanyard indicated that we were the top drill class, which meant that we led the parade onto and off the drill square. So that's me there in the middle. But the chap on my left, or to the right on the photograph, is the same person that was stood at the end of the class picture before. And if we flip up to the next photograph, there's a closer one where we were in drill. And some of you may or may not recognize that officer, but I'll tell you now that that officer goes by the name of Andrew Rhodes, who's currently the Chief Constable of Lancashire Constabulary. He was in Lancs Constabulary. He stayed in Lancs Constabulary as far as I'm aware. I don't believe he's gone out and come back to Lancs, but he's currently the Chief Con of Lancs, and a really, really lovely, down-to-earth guy. Oversees well-being and stuff, which is a really important issue for policing at the moment, and something that really we're doing so well with, but we're only scratching the surface. Anyway, Mr. Rhodes was Chief Con, but he was in our class at Bruges. I think really then the final thing really for me is that you then spend another 5 weeks back on division. And this is a poignant moment for me, really, because my tutor on the second 5 weeks period was a gentleman by the name of Bob Swan. And Bob had been off work for some time prior to, it was his first, I was his first probationer, having returned to duty. And the reason that he'd been off is he had lost his young son in terrible, tragic circumstances. And one of the things that really struck me about him, that he was a very kind, very gentle soul, but funny, well switched on, knew his job, but he'd gone through this awful trauma. And the thing that always sticks with me with Bob is that one of the first jobs that we ever went to, we were on patrol in Didsbury, and we ended up helping out at the scene of a very serious collision where somebody was likely to lose their life. And we got the job of going and telling the family that their child had been involved in a collision. And I have to say, hand on heart, I could not have done it. I was not prepared, and I was not ready or anything for that kind of thing. And I think that's something that you have to see somebody else do first, and then judge how you might do it yourself personally. But he went out, and we went to the family and told them the circumstances and took them to the hospital and stuff. And you think, how hard must that have been for him? We never discussed it. Maybe that's something of the times of policing at the time. We never discussed it, but he dealt with it immaculately. He dealt with it professionally. And when he got home and sobbed his heart out, I don't know. But it was really tough for him, I imagine, to have dealt with that. Many years later, he died early, and it was one of the saddest days in my career to hear that he'd gone, because your tutor constable, if you have a good relationship with your tutor constable, it lasts forever. That relationship is there, and I got on with Bob tremendously well. So what comes from that is that you finish your 5 weeks. I finished my 5 weeks, and what you end up with in your PDP, which is where we started before, is this, which is in your PDP, right at the very end of the foundation course, you get signed off as being fit for independent patrol, which means basically I can now go out on patrol on my own and be trusted to be a police officer and to get on with the job. But also, you don't know everything, but you're there to ask help and seek guidance from your friends and peers and colleagues and supervision along the way, but you're fit and safe to go out on patrol. That's quite a moment, that, when they say, that's it, you're on your own, you're fine. So after that, 1991 was very much just a year of learning the ropes, getting to know my new team, and more training courses that keep coming up, because you finish your foundation course and then you do post-foundation 1, post-foundation 2, post-foundation 3, all sorts of stuff going on. But one of the interesting things is, you'll know that as I've pulled the that picture of the PDP up earlier on, and as Kerry said, blown it all the dust off it. It's been in the loft in a briefcase for years and years and years. It's full of utter rubbish. There's so much stuff in there that I read, and I'm so embarrassed about reading what I put about myself. But I suppose, again, that's a sign of the times. However, it also sparks a lot of memories. And one of the lovely things, really, that you have, is, having spoken about Bob, is that Bob, being my tutor constable for the final 5 weeks, was responsible for writing up my final assessment. And it's so lovely that I've got it there. It's not typed, it's handwritten, and his personal. I read through it the other day. I got tears in my eyes reading it. But I read through it the other day, and it's his sense of humor and his personality and everything I remember about him shines through from all his words. So it's an amazing, lovely little keepsake to have and remember my time over there. But there you go. That's it. 1991. That from February 1991 right the way through to December and the end of that year was pretty much full on training, all the way through. Sedgley Park, back for training, Bruges, the 15 weeks training that we did at Bruges, 10 weeks being tutored. And then you're out onto the, I was posted to Withington, as I said, and essentially you were out on foot patrol and trying to find work and being sent to jobs, and occasionally being picked up and dropped off at a job so that you could deal with it. As an example, I might be patrolling the Withington area on foot, and then they come in and say, we've got a sudden death, but it's in Didsbury. And the sergeant will shout up and say, that'll be a good job for Neil. Give that to Neil, get the van to pick him up and drop him off. So you might get shifted around if there was a job that they wanted you to have the experience of. So there we go, 1991, all done, over, and tomorrow we shall move on to 1992 as we continue through the post-foundation courses, some experiences through that second year of what is essentially your probationary period. You spend 2 years learning the job, and if after 2 years you're successful, you get signed off and confirmed as appointed. Up until that point, they can kick you off anytime they like. But there we go, 1991. Hope that was enjoyable and informative. I was even getting a little bit emotional talking about Bob before as well, but there we go. I shall see you tomorrow. Hope you found this interesting, and thanks for watching. Replay viewers, thanks for dropping in and watching too. Look forward to seeing you tomorrow on 33 years in 31 days, day 3, as we look at 1992. Look forward to that. Hope to see you then. Until then, take care, stay safe, and have a lovely evening. Bye-bye.